Certainly. Here's a rewritten version of the story segment. Truth be told, I sold our house. My brother-in-law Kevin disclosed, leaving both my husband and me dumbfounded. The one most taken aback was my mother-in-law. Why? Why would you do such a thing? Weren't you supposed to come pick me up? She demanded, her distress palpable. Trying to diffuse the tension, Kevin urged her to calm down as he attempted to justify his actions. I'm Sandra, and I work remotely with my husband, Robert. The tranquil setting allows us flexibility, something we both cherish, I explained. However, when my mother-in-law moved in with us, her disapproval was evident. Why aren't you two going out to work? She would chastise us, oblivious to our remote work setup. Her skepticism drained me, reminiscent of past confrontations. Despite our explanations, she remained adamant. But aren't you just playing around? When will you two start working properly? Her inability to comprehend our work added strain to our already tenuous relationship. I wonder if I made a mistake coming to this house, she lamented, hinting at her desire to live with Kevin and his wealthy wife Carol. Kevin's opulent abode contrasted starkly with ours, and my mother-in-law longed to move there permanently, oblivious to the strained dynamics between Kevin and her. Despite our efforts to accommodate her, the situation became untenable. Kevin's impending visit signaled potential upheaval. What do we do? That guy hasn't changed a bit, Robert fretted, acknowledging the imminent disruption Kevin's presence would bring. Sure, here's a rewritten version of the story segment. My husband and I exchanged puzzled glances as we listened to our mother-in-law's excited chatter. He's coming to pick me up. Please help me prepare to move, she enthused, whisking Robert away to her room. Robert returned with a troubled expression. Mom, Kevin's not coming to pick you up. He probably called because something happened, he explained gently. She dismissed his words with a snort. That can't be true. He didn't say anything about picking you up on the phone, right? She retorted, refusing to believe otherwise. I'm tired of this house. You're probably hoping to make me a housekeeper, but that's not going to happen, she added, her paranoia evident. We were baffled by her unfounded suspicions. Since she arrived, she had enjoyed freedom, avoided household chores, and lived comfortably on the allowance we provided. Nevertheless, we obliged, packing her belongings and awaiting Kevin's arrival. When Kevin and his wife arrived, their overly friendly demeanor set off alarm bells. As my mother-in-law emerged, her eyes sparkled with delight. You finally arrived, she exclaimed, seizing the opportunity to air her grievances about us. Sandra handles the chores, and we provide for her needs. Robert interjected, his expression conflicted, but Kevin remained skeptical, accusing us of mistreating their mother. Despite Robert's attempts to clarify, Kevin remained unconvinced. Robert has always been clueless, he remarked, implying negligence on our part. Kevin really understands me, our mother-in-law declared, siding with him. As the conversation unfolded, Robert's confusion deepened. My expression soured despite our efforts to maintain composure. Reluctantly, we ushered our guests to the living room, seating ourselves opposite each other around the coffee table. Why are you just sitting there? Serve the tea, demanded my mother-in-law, surprising us all. I thought you were going to make the tea, mother-in-law, I countered, taken aback by her sudden request. Making an old woman work? See, Kevin, Sandra's like this, she lamented, feigning tears. I was too stunned to respond. After serving the tea, a somber atmosphere descended upon the room. We sold our house, Kevin announced, shocking Robert and me. But it was my mother-in-law who seemed most affected. Why would you do such a thing? Didn't you come to pick me up? She demanded. Got it, Kevin replied, still chuckling, before heading off to prepare for their move. After they departed, my mother-in-law sat in silence, deep in thought. Robert and I assumed she was still reeling from the shock. The following day, the couple's belongings arrived promptly. This is quite a lot. Where should we put it all? We might need to sell some items or rent a storage unit, we pondered aloud while arranging Kevin's things. It was then that my mother-in-law dropped a bombshell. I've been thinking, won't we be more secure in the future if Kevin stays here? Then you freeloaders can leave, can't you? She declared abruptly. My husband and I were taken aback by her sudden proclamation. If you insist, I can tolerate Robert's presence, but I won't abide by a wife who can't contribute. Get a divorce, then we can use the space Sandra occupies for all these packages, she suggested eagerly, her eyes gleaming as she looked to my husband for approval. What are you talking about? He reacted, utterly bewildered. Then my brother-in-law and his wife arrived, greeted warmly by my mother-in-law. Although still shaken by her earlier words, my husband chose to brush them aside for the moment and directed his brother to handle the packages. As they began sorting through the items, my husband advised, "There's quite a lot here. Consider selling or storing some of them." To our surprise, his brother's response was far from appreciative. "What are you talking about? These are important packages. How could I sell or risk them being damaged?" He retorted defensively. My husband sighed in exasperation at his brother's selfishness. "This is our house. It's only fair that you endure some inconvenience. If you're unhappy, find another place to live quickly." At that moment, my mother-in-law interjected, "If you two are not happy with Kevin and the rest, you can leave. You're basically freeloaders and not needed here. Kevin is trying to start a business, while all you do is lounge around the house with your so-called remote work. You're nothing but a nuisance," she declared, as if the house were her own. My husband and I exchanged incredulous glances. My brother-in-law and his wife, initially surprised by my mother-in-law's outburst, began to smirk. "That might not be a bad idea," they chimed in. "Mom, that's a good idea. We're tired of looking for a place. How about selling this house to us, Carol?" I felt a wave of discomfort wash over me as my brother-in-law and his wife made their bold declaration. "I feel uncomfortable with you two around, so it would be helpful if you sold this place to us. Plus, it seems like our mother-in-law is on our side, so sell this place to us," they insisted. My husband and I were left dumbfounded by their audacious request. "What nonsense are you spouting?" my husband began, but his words were cut short by my mother-in-law, who gloated, "See, both Kevin and Carol are saying the same thing. So what will you do, Robert? If you're going to divorce, you can stay here," she added, shooting me a triumphant glare. I steeled myself to respond, but before I could, my husband spoke up. "Don't just say whatever you want. Why does Sandra have to leave?" He challenged, his face flushed with anger. "It's better without a burden around, isn't it?" My mother-in-law retorted, unfazed. However, my husband's exasperation was palpable as he retorted, "You don't understand anything. This is Sandra's house." His words elicited gasps from my mother-in-law, brother-in-law, and his wife. Ignoring their shock, my husband continued, his tone adding to the tension. "This is the house that Sandra bought for our life together," he clarified. "What? What are you saying? Isn't it the husband's job to buy the house?" "There's no such rule," my mother-in-law objected, her disbelief evident. "Moreover, Sandra covers all of Mom's allowance and living expenses. Sandra said she'd take on that burden because your pension is minimal, and it would be difficult for you to have financial freedom with just that," my husband explained, his gaze unwavering. Despite his clarity, my mother-in-law seemed incredulous, sneering at me in disbelief. "Unbelievable. Sandra just sits in front of the computer all day. She doesn't even do housework seriously. Wasn't my allowance coming out of my pension? Otherwise, there's no way Sandra could afford to give me $500 a month. Moreover," she continued, "Sandra is the one managing my pension, isn't she? You might have told Robert otherwise. But I'm sure you're dipping into my pension," she accused, huffing up her chest as she glared at me. I met my mother-in-law's gaze squarely, refusing to be intimidated. "It's true, I've found success as a business owner. You're the one spreading lies. If anyone should consider divorce, it's you for accusing your wife falsely. You should live here with me, Capon and Carol. Besides, there's plenty of evidence of Sandra's earnings." "Here it is," I declared, producing my paycheck and presenting it to her. The shock on my mother-in-law's face, along with Kevin and his wife's stunned silence, was palpable. We haven't touched any of Mom's pensions since she moved in here. If she ever wanted to leave, Sandra has been managing it so she could live independently. But instead, Mom, you've been bossing Sandra around, interfering with her work. You're the problem here. If you can't accept Sandra, then you should leave right now, I asserted firmly. I don't believe any of this, my mother-in-law protested, but I continued undeterred. We don't mind if you and Kevin stay temporarily, but some patience should be expected. We didn't want you to live here in the first place. We only agreed because you begged us, I said, glaring at Kevin and his wife. They broke out in a cold sweat, unaccustomed to my assertiveness. Just kidding, I added with a smirk. But you sure are earning a lot, huh? I wish you could teach me some business tricks, right, Carol? I quipped, trying to diffuse the tension. While it's true we were initially concerned about living with our sister-in-law, it seems she's proven to be a good person after all, Kevin said, smiling at his wife. But my mother-in-law remained unyielding. Don't act so high and mighty. You're just a bum. Enough, Robert. You should leave too. Go outside and see how harsh this world can be, my mother-in-law insisted, her conviction unwavering. Interrupting her, I sighed deeply. Well, if that's how you feel, we'll pack our things and move to a new house. You guys will be stuck with a mortgage, but if that's okay with you, don't come crying to us for help. If you insist, mother-in-law will leave, even with a pension. Maintaining your lifestyle will be challenging, I concluded, resigned to the situation. However, it seemed there was little room for negotiation. At our words, my mother-in-law's face blushed crimson, and she erupted, demanding that we leave. Wait, you can't be serious. We don't have to do that, do we? I protested, hoping for some semblance of reason. Yes, yes. If you two are here, we're safe, Kevin and his wife interjected, attempting to intervene. But my mother-in-law silenced them with a fierce glare. Don't you dare talk back, Kevin. You're going to be a CEO, aren't you? I don't mind you using my pension. Just start a company and show us how successful you can become. I'll show you what happens when you defy us, she threatened, her words dripping with intensity. Realizing the futility of the situation, we decided it was best to disengage from her and Kevin's family and left the house. The burden of the mortgage remained, but we transferred ownership to Kevin's name. In the aftermath of the ordeal, while there was still some residual dissatisfaction, being free from my mother-in-law's sarcasm allowed us to resume our normal routine. However, just when we were settling into our new apartment and continuing our remote work, my mother-in-law called my husband in tears. Kevin has taken my pension and disappeared. He hasn't come back in a week. Carol and I are left alone in the house, and we're in trouble. Please help us, she pleaded, her distress evident. After my husband comforted my mother-in-law, he asked the obvious question, why had Kevin gone missing? I gave all of my pension to Kevin for his startup, but he ended up spending it all on gambling. When I confronted him about it, he disappeared. My mother-in-law cried out desperately. Unable to continue due to her sobbing, the phone was passed to Carol. Could you please call us back? We can't live like this. Ever since Kevin's startup failed and he sold the house we were living in, our parents have disowned us. My dad won't forgive us for selling that house. We haven't been able to reach either our dad or mom since, Carol pleaded with my husband. My husband, witnessing their distress, muttered, I knew it, in a disgusted tone. That's unfortunate, but don't involve us. We warned you when we left, didn't we? Even if you come crying to us, we won't help. You can report Kevin as missing to the police. It's none of our business, he stated firmly before hanging up. I was shocked by his coldness, but my husband simply remarked they got what they deserved, and I found myself agreeing with him. Subsequently, they called my husband's cell phone numerous times. Frustrated, my husband answered, only to hear Carol crying about not knowing how to report Kevin as missing. We advised her to call the police, but despite their efforts, Kevin remained elusive. Just when it seemed they might not find him, we heard the shocking news that Kevin had been arrested for bank robbery in another state. It appeared he had resorted to crime to repay his debts, and it wasn't his first offense. Carol couldn't return to her parents' home and continued living with my mother-in-law in that house. As for my mother-in-law, Kevin had drained all her pension, leaving her to repay his debt. She had started working part-time to make ends meet. While my husband and I expressed sympathy for their plight, we made it clear that we had no intention of helping them. We severed all communication. They were experiencing the harsh realities of life that my mother-in-law had always talked about. Despite the upheaval since my mother-in-law moved in with us, my husband and I were relieved to have returned to our peaceful days.